Who Killed Nelson Nutmeg? Written and read by Danny Stack.
Chapter 15. Drone Zone. While Billy and Shiv followed Diane, the Colonel and Woody were following their own line of investigation. "Time for Operation Drone Zone," said the Colonel as she placed Woody's drone in front of her, excited by the prospect of flying it around the camp to see what they could find out. "Is it on?" she asked. Woody fussed over the controls, standing on the climbing frame in the playground, while the Colonel knelt on the ground in front of him. The drone started beeping and a red light came on by its camera. The Colonel tapped it to make sure it was working. "I know what I'm doing," said Woody as he focused on the controls. He didn't want to show the Colonel that he was nervous. He didn't want to let her down. To Woody, the Colonel was the coolest girl he'd ever met. The Colonel pulled herself up on the climbing frame to join him. "Make a good sniper's nest, this," she said. "Spider's nest? Where?" Woody said, mishearing the Colonel. His nerves were getting the better of him. The Colonel was too excited to pay attention to what Woody was saying. "Is it ready?" She took out her mobile phone to check their coordinates. Latitude 50.710562, longitude 2.76409, she said. Woody didn't know what she was talking about, but he pretended he did. Yeah, was all he could say. "Start test run. Eyes in the skies, people," said the Colonel as Woody turned to his controls and the drone took off. Whoosh! It glided into the air with ease. At least, that's what it looked like. Actually, Woody was struggling to keep the drone straight. "Woody, 10 meters south, turn 90 degrees, commanded the Colonel. I'm trying, Woody cried. The drone seemed to have a life of its own and wouldn't respond to Woody's controls. The drone honed in on a couple of kids who were walking towards the playground. The kids didn't know what the drone was, and they ran for cover. "I thought you said you knew what you were doing," said the Colonel, disappointed. "It must be the new firmware," said Woody, hoping that sounded technical enough to convince the Colonel. He dabbed at the controls again, which made all sorts of beeping noises, but nothing seemed to affect the drone, which flew off in all directions. Then it floated into an out-of-bounds area towards the back of Nelson's retreat. This area had various machinery and equipment that was used for camp maintenance or general storage. Mr. Slug was bustling around, acting suspiciously, covering up a few large gas canisters. He got distracted when he heard a strange noise looming up from behind. He whisked around to see the drone, which was seemingly flying right at him. He instinctively ran behind a nearby digger to hide, but the drone seemed to follow him. Mr. Slug lifted a yard brush and tried to hit the drone away. "Go on, get out of it," he shouted. The yard brush and Woody's erratic controls were enough to send the drone wobbling high into the sky, out of sight and out of range, possibly now lost forever. Chapter 16. Fake Nelson Nutmeg Revealed. Billy and Shiv snuck along the road that led to the wall by the pool. They had followed Diane and successfully stayed out of sight. They peered over the wall to see Diane standing by the pool, next to the Nelson's nutty hour clock cutout. Diane checked her watch as she waited impatiently. Billy and Shiv wondered what she was up to. Then Nelson Nutmeg arrived, or the fake Nelson Nutmeg at least. He ran towards Diane in his suit. "It's 5 past nutty hour. Get your skates on," said Diane, sounding very cross indeed. The fake Nelson Nutmeg slowly took off his costumed head. Billy and Shiv watched eagerly to see who it might be. The fake Nelson took off his head completely to reveal, well, some guy in a suit, as Shiv had said earlier. Billy and Shiv didn't recognise him at all. "It's boiling in here," said the fake Nelson Nutmeg. "This costume stinks." "It's brand new. It must be the fur," Diane replied. Billy and Shiv looked at each other. "New?" Billy said. She thought about this for a second. "Did you know who Nelson Nutmeg was? The real Nelson?" Shiv shrugged. "He must have been someone," said Billy. "Hold on, those nut bars are going right through me," said Shiv, and he released a huge fart. Billy could barely contain her disgust, but the farting noise caught the attention of Diane, who looked across in their direction. Billy ducked immediately out of sight, and Shiv followed her a moment later. Had Diane seen them? Meanwhile, in another part of Nelson's retreat, Swindon was on the case. He stood close to a caravan so as not to be seen. He took out his mobile voice recorder and hit a button. Tuesday, 12:08 p.m. No sign of the fake Nelson Nutmeg or the mysterious alien queen Diane. Crept down low and edged forward, still speaking into his voice recorder. Got to stay low, out of sight. You never know when. Swindon saw something strange approaching in the sky, and he fell backwards as he tried to make a hasty retreat. 2 kids from the park walked by and stopped to see what Swindon was doing. "They're here! They've come back for me!" cried Swindon. One of the kids nudged his friend and gestured that Swindon was crazy. But then the kids turned when they heard the increasing noise of what was approaching. Now they finally saw what Swindon was so afraid of. It was Woody's drone, and it was flying right at them. Swindon ran off as quickly as he could, while the 2 kids did their best to avoid the errant drone. Woody and the Colonel arrived, chasing down the drone. "Woody, stop it!" shouted the Colonel. "I'm trying, it's acting all wonky," Woody replied. The drone got closer and closer and closer to Swindon. It looked like it was going to hit him, but then it swung sharply 180 degrees. Woody and the Colonel watched on helplessly as it headed off towards the cliffs. Chapter 17. Drone Dead Zone. Back at the pool, Shiv's epic fart finally came to an end. Billy couldn't believe it. How could so much foul gas come out of one young boy? They stayed crouched behind the wall though, so Diane couldn't see them. She was looking in their direction, suspicious, but then the fake Nelson Nutmeg regained her attention. "It's hard to stay in character. What's my motivation?" he asked. "Do you always complain this much?" Diane replied. "And what happened to the last Nelson Nutmeg anyway?" "Oh, you don't want to know," Diane said with an edge of menace in her voice. Billy and Shiv peeked their heads over the wall again, just in time to hear Diane's last reply. The fake Nelson Nutmeg had had enough. He put on Nelson's costumed head with a scowl. "It's time for nutty hour," he said half-heartedly. "You don't speak, numbnut," Diane said. This was the last straw for the fake Nelson Nutmeg. "I was in Far From the Madding Crowd with Carey Mulligan, and now this! I need to get a better agent." He turned with a swift movement, swishing Nelson Nutmeg's tail in front of Diane, and stormed off. Billy nudged Shiv in their hiding spot. "Come on, let's get the others." Meanwhile, Woody and the Colonel had tracked down the drone to the top of the cliff, where it was resting peacefully. "There," said the Colonel. They crouched down beside it. "I think it's dead," said Woody. "Try the controls again," said the Colonel. But before Woody had a chance, the drone suddenly took off by itself and flew into the sky. "Oh no," said Woody. The Colonel saluted the drone as it flew out towards the sea. Billy and Shiv had followed the trail of action up the cliffs and ran towards Woody and the Colonel. "What happened?" asked Billy. "The drone was a dead zone," the Colonel replied. "You put me off," Woody protested. "What did you find out?" the Colonel asked Billy. "No time. Activities. Let's meet back at the den as soon as." They all nodded and ran off to join their previously arranged activities. Woody made one final attempt to control the drone, but it was no use. It faltered out towards the sea, its battery life fading fast.
You've been listening to Who Killed Nelson Nutmeg. It was read by Danny Stack from his own novelisation of the film. To find out more and watch some clips from the movie, visit nelsonnutmeg.com.